Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. We'll give everyone a minute or two to arrive. I'm just hanging out at the door. All right, just looks like about everybody's inside now.
I had a hoodie up here. All right.
That? All right, good morning, everybody. Let's see. Everybody. Well, good morning again, everybody. So let me begin by just saying a little bit about this Project 3. You know, I took a peek in the Google Drive just to see, how it's going. And I was a little surprised to see so little work in there. Give me a minute. I just want to respond. Hang on 1 minute, just to a text. It is possible that people just put them in the last like 2 or 3 minutes. But last I looked, there was maybe 6 homeworks in a class of over 20. So yeah, of course, I'm a little bit alarmed. You know, it's a draft, so no one should panic that your grade is going to be affected because that draft is not in there right now. I'm keeping an open mind, even though I'm somewhat alarmed.
Wait, where's the link for that?
It's always on the handout.
I was looking on there. I couldn't find it. That's why.
Oh, really? Was it not on last week's handout? Would you look at today's handout? And
yeah.
My file said it was too big. Like
really?
when I it's on there, but it says like you need to download it.
Okay, give me 1 second. Let's address these things at once. Again, nobody panic about this stuff. It's good when you give me feedback so I can troubleshoot with you. Give me a second. I want to screen share first to address the first problem. Let me just get our light up. So you know what we can do is this. If I neglected to be clear about submitting them last week, which makes a lot of sense actually, because frankly, you're going to be supporting each other. So the Google Drive thing is a bit of a formality to make sure that people don't sleep on the job. So you know what you could do, Miles, or anyone else who would like to submit it while I'm talking to you? This is today's handout. This is the link to, sorry, we're class 103. This is the link to our main drive. Even though this little bit here is talking about the revisions folder, this is the main link to the drive. You just drop it loose right in there. So if you go to today's handout, you'll see this link here where it says Thursday group, this blue link. I'm going to open mine to show you. And here we are, just drop it loose. I see a bunch of people just got their work just now in there. So look, I apologize if I was less than clear than that. You know, to be honest with you, I'm also in the midst of reconfiguring everything for this online class that we have right now. This class is only given in the fall, doesn't exist in the other semester. So there was no version of it when COVID began. So really all these decisions are being made for you guys right now. So let me back up for a minute. I want to address 2 things. Okay, so it'd be nice for you to put it in the drive, right? I will definitely need it in the drive for next class, the updated draft, right? If yours is not in the drive today, that one thing will not affect you in any direct way, so don't panic. Now, I do want to also say something about if the file is just too large to get in the drive. Here's an option for you. I'm going to borrow one of your works. Hang on a second that I happen to have open. So I'm opening Illustrator.
I just uploaded mine.
Did you? Great, Miles. Excellent. So I want to show you something here. Adi, I'm going to borrow yours. I hope you don't mind. Are you there?
Yeah, no
Is
worries.
she here?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there you are.
You can just
Yeah, I'm
zoom
gonna
out
borrow
on
it.
it. I don't know
So
why it's zoomed in.
yours file was huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, your file was huge, right? So it wouldn't let me view it in Google Drive, but I see that you managed to load it, so I had to download it. Just wanted to get a peek just to see how things are going. By the way, it's looking great. So I just want to say that, but that's not the subject. If you can't even get it in the drive, anybody in here, and you just must, this is from my class, in any other class, there's a couple things that work, but one solution would be save your Illustrator file, same as always. And then while you're in Illustrator, do File menu, Save As. We've used this solution for other things. Just give me a minute here. And then when you do Save As, it's offering to make another copy for you. You're allowed to come down here to Format and change the format. So right now, the format that I'm going to recommend is PDF, which should be significantly smaller. So I'm making a PDF of Adi's work right now. I'm going to pop it on my desktop just to check something out. And I am going to save that to the desktop right now. I'm going to click Save PDF. Now I want to do something quickly just so we could just see if this is a good idea or not, because, you know, I knew I was going to have to do some improvisation today because of the size of these files. Those 4 photos really are making the files much heavier. And there's a number of solutions and they all have pluses and minuses. I want to take a look at something though. So I'm going to quickly take a peek on the desktop at that PDF that I just made. And its file size is 61 megabytes, right? I'm going to compare that to the original Illustrator file. And let's see. Honestly, I'm hoping for the best. But this one's 61 megabytes. I got absolutely nothing out of it. I'm disappointed. All right, here's Plan C. Plan B didn't work so well. So here's Plan C. Let's take a look at that. I want to think it through because, again, in the past, you guys would physically drop it in a pickup box at school, which had no file size limit. So this is definitely like, you know, a brand new, you know, problem, you know. So I'm a little surprised by it, but that's okay. There's other options. I think what I'm going to try next is File menu, Export as instead. I'm going to do Export As. And I'm going to choose JPEG from here. I'm going to save this one to the desktop too. I want to say a couple quick things about this idea. And I'll go over it if I like the results. I kind of already know that I will. I'm actually going to raise this up, this quality slider up. And I'm going to go take a look on the desktop and see if that actually exported. Here's my desktop.
Does it not change the colors? Like if I did my colors in CMYK and then you export it in RGB? RGB.
You know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I just want to say real quickly, no, it shouldn't. And the reason being, RGB has a larger color range than CMYK. So if you were switching from RGB to CMYK, you would lose some color because CMYK is smaller, but CMYK to RGB should be fine. So listen, I do want to say something about this, and I'm going to go over it real quickly. I'm going to go over the JPEG option one more time. That's an emergency tactic. You know, it's not ideal. The thing about the JPEG is if I or the art director or someone on your team, say in the working world, needed to work on it, they couldn't work on the JPEG. The JPEG is, for us, is nothing more than a preview to give them a look at roughly how it's going. You know what I mean? So I'd have to say, for the time being, if you want me to look at something or I want you to show me something, you just cannot upload it at this point, right? We'll work with the JPEG, you know. So I'm going to show you one more time how to make a JPEG. I'm going to rethink this probably right after class. Actually, I have a class right after this. So over the next couple days, and I may actually alter today's handout to make this a little bit more manageable for everybody. But here's the lowdown. If the Illustrator file is too big to behave, you can't even get it into Google Drive. Right now, I'm going to recommend making a JPEG out of it and putting that in Google Drive. So here we go, one more time. So when you're looking at your file in Illustrator, you're going to do File menu, Export, right? Instead of Save As. You know, Save As didn't have any file types that I'm excited about for this particular purpose. So I'm going to rethink them. So instead, we're doing File menu, Export. Now, File menu, Export doesn't open the file it makes. It literally exports something and puts it away in the folder. So it doesn't disturb your workflow at all. Export, Export As. Guys, I'm going to make one more change. I hope you're listening closely. Adi, this is to deal with your really good question. PNGs may produce a slightly better quality than the JPEG. So I just did Export As. I'm going to take a peek here and make sure PNG is there. Here it is. PNG is at the top. So here's my current advice then. If you're having upload troubles, keep your Illustrator file open, do File menu, Export, go to the bottom here where it says Format. So you're going to need to take notes of this. Choose PNG. You'll probably get the best file type. It's definitely going to be small enough. So I'm going to click Export. Option resolutions. Do I care about this? I'm going to stick with the default, which is medium. And I'm just going to click OK. Let's take a look at my desktop and just be sure, and then we're going to have to move forward a little bit. The JPEG here was 169 kilobytes, really, really small. This one's, you know, several times the size, 3 or 4 times the size. Here's how it looks. So I do believe it looks better. And anyway, it's well within the range of Google Drive. So you could just drop that in there.
Should I resubmit if my file was the same problem?
It would be great if you could do it now. That would be terrific. You know, folks, listen, I got to say something to everybody in here. You're doing great. And I know some of you are getting nervous now because, you know, it's midterm and people are more tired than they were. I got a message from somebody today who has a job outside of school and is feeling sick. By the way, this week I've gotten 6 messages exactly like that one. And every time I hear someone sick, I'm thinking the same thing you're thinking right now. I hope it's just like under the weather and nothing bigger, you know? And I know how hard it is to hold a job when you're at a college, especially a really good one, which is very demanding. So, you know, when push comes to shove, right, you just cannot keep up with me for 1 week. You know, it's not a habit. It's 1 week. I'm always going to be on your side. You send me a thoughtful email, I will almost always back you. Find some way where it won't impact your grade. My concern is larger, though, you know, which is that this assignment is hard and it's large. It may be the largest assignment. The 4th assignment isn't quite as big as this one. So this is really the pushy one, you know. The good news is there's 2 draft weeks and then the final. You know, so if you're behind right now, the couple of you that are behind, if you could catch up by next week, I think you'll be okay. If you can't, I'm a little less sure, you know, because like I said, it's big. Hey, does anybody have anything related to these kind of tech issues we're having that you'd like to say? So I have a question for all of you, and you're welcome to gesture answers or use reactions, you know, which is a feature that should be on your toolbar. I don't know why it's not on mine. But I see it looks like some people have chatted me. So give me just a minute. I just want to double check that. That's the thing I'm worse at. You know, I got to say something. I'm very excited the way you support each other. I love seeing chats when you guys are asking each other questions. You know, like how did Adi get those gradients so smooth? Luckily, we're going over gradients today, so hopefully I can help with that question about smooth gradients. I want to ask you guys a real specific question. Was your computer acting extra slow for this assignment? If your computer was, could you give me one of these? I just want to count how many people had that problem. So about 5, 6 people. So, you know, I'm going to be forced to show you guys something today. I'm a little resistant to it, but I think there's no way around it. So bear with me as I think on my feet. You know,
It was specifically slow with the like third gradient option, the one where you like
really?
draw
With
the
the freeform
lines.
gradient?
Yeah, but
I had some issues with that
yeah.
too. But I got to tell you what's probably causing the biggest problem. It's me teaching you guys file menu place and asking you to uncheck link. Guys, please give me the best attention you have, even if you're half awake. You know, psh, 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 wake up, because this is very nerdy, and I'm going to have to figure out a way to introduce you all to it in the time that I have, which is rather short from my perspective. When you uncheck link, well, like I've been asking you to do, right? The number one advantage is convenience. You know, that there's one file for you to manage, just the Illustrator file. You brought in 4 photographs, right? And they're all just sort of a permanent resident. They live in the Illustrator file. So theoretically, you could send me the Illustrator file and I don't have to fuss with 4 photographs. They're all in there. But when you do file menu place and leave link on, right? The number one disadvantage is I won't see those photos unless you know how to package the file properly, a subject that I've been avoiding for a little while, right? If you know how to package the project properly, then you could, it'll be a folder with the Illustrator file in it and all the photos in the same folder. And the Illustrator file is not linked, rather is it uses what we call embedded. You know, let me back up because this was not what I planned on teaching today. So again, if link is checked, hang on a second, someone's at the door. I've asked you to not check it, but if link is checked, your computer will be faster. That's the first thing I need to say. The Illustrator file will probably behave faster. I usually will not check it if I only have 4 photos. But to be honest with you, I spend more time in Photoshop and we don't have time to go over that. I'll make sure those photos are not 10 times the size of my document. You know, so if they're like, you know, 200 megabytes each, 250 megabytes each, you just raise the file size by a gigabyte. So by not, by leaving link on checked, it's inconvenient but faster. So this is what I want to say. If I could squeeze it in, I may today take a detour, kind of drop one subject and show you how linking, you know, I think I'm going to do that. There's one subject I think I can let go of. So if all goes well, or toward the end of the class today, I'm going to show you plan B of how to make these files speed up. Okay? So listen, I want to just take a quick look at something while you're here, and then we really do have to move forward. And I have a plan, and I don't think anyone should worry too much. Let me just, I almost left someone locked out. Gotcha. Julia, don't worry about being late. Your router went on you. That's happened to me even during class. So you'll be okay, you know, today. All right, I want to just take a quick look here, just to have a rough idea if this changed anything, this conversation. And it surely did. And I got to say, even if I was to click on random ones, you know, a lot of them are not going to load. I'm going to get this, you know, couldn't preview. So I'm going to have to download them anyway. So this is what I'd like to say for right now. Let's put the subject on hold. Toward the end of the class, I'm going to steal some time and show you guys a couple of options how to better manage large files like these. You know, I want to be very clear. I usually do uncheck link the way that I'm teaching you because I don't keep my photos for long. Bring my photo, do what I need and delete it. Bring another one, do what I need and delete it. So I don't really need all this fancy linking. But I had to do a few posters that were in Illustrator that included about 20 photos, little photos in the poster. And I had to do a set of 3, so there are like 60 photos involved. really, my computer could not handle it at all. So I did leave link on, and just takes a little bit more management. Let me shut up. This stuff's too boring. And at the end of the class, I want to come back to it. It's important, but it's more interesting once we do the exciting stuff and we got a motive behind it. All right. So I want to move forward a little bit, guys. We're going to try something brand new, and holy cow, today's just giving me a hard time all across the board. So I wanted to do breakout rooms, right? And again, some of you guys probably don't like those a lot. Have you all done breakout rooms in any class yet? Right? Some people have, some people have not. It's just a way where I could break you into small groups. And I was going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups of about 5 people where you could just talk to each other about where you're at, how show each other your work and just get a little light feedback because there's no time to do it as a group. I'm a little disturbed, though, that this feature is refusing to show up right now. And even though I watched a bunch of tutorials, I've never done a breakout group before. Let's see. Let's see. Give me 1 second here. Aha, it did work. Give me a minute. All right, folks, this is what I'd like for everybody to do, right? I want everyone in here to open up your Illustrator file on your own computer, right? I want to show you my handout so you understand what's about to happen. Let me just organize myself a little bit. Okay. So you're going to open your Illustrator draft right now while I talk to you. And then you're going to take a peek at the bottom of the screen where you see the green new share or share screen button. Should say share screen, right? Now don't click it yet. I just want you to take note of it. Now I think a lot of you have shared your screen in some class and a lot of you have not shared your screen. So I want to say something. When your turn comes to share your screen, just to show your Illustrator file, right? When your turn comes, you'll click that green button that's on the controls for Zoom that says share on it, right? Then it's going to give you another screen that's going to ask you to choose what you want to share. I highly recommend that you choose either desktop or screen. On Macs, it's desktop. I think on Windows, it may say screen. The only reason I'm going to recommend that choice instead of, it's also to give you Illustrator as a choice or something like that, is this way you could show whatever you want. You know, you can just pull out anything you want to show. So this is what I do every time I share my screen. I'm on a Mac, I click desktop. Some of you may get screen as an option. When your turn is over, you just click and share and the next person can share. So here's the idea. I'm going to break you into groups, right? So there'll be about 4 or 5 of you in each group. What I want you to do is please speak up, be friendly. Remember, these people know your troubles better than anybody, right? They're also in New York. They're also in this school. They're also in this class, right? And you're going to say, oh, this is the one thing that's bugging me. Or they'll say, oh, I love it. Or someone will ask you a question. Just have an exchange. So I want to show you how this is going to go. Here's some good questions. What do you like best and why? You know, and what could be improved and how? You're not here to judge each other. You're here to help each other. Now here I had slated 25 minutes here and we just lost a bunch of time just now. So I'm going to make it 20 minutes. So you're going to have no more than 4 minutes a person to discuss the work. 4 minutes is actually a long time if you're going to be shy. If you're going to sit there and refuse to speak, right? So I'm going to hope at least one of you could kind of elbow the rest to participate, right? So here's what's about to happen, right? I'm going to turn these on automatically, right? Your teacher is new to this particular step, so thank you for helping me learn, right? You're going to be in a random group of random colleagues and say who goes first as soon as you get in there and one of you screen share, right? Can you guys do that amongst each other? Let's see how it goes, right? And what's going to happen in 20 minutes is you'll get like a 60-second alert that it's about to end. So again, don't spend more than 3 or 4 minutes per person, right? And you'll automatically be led back to class right after it. All right, let's see how this goes. It's a bit of an experiment. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to make 5 groups. And give me 1 second. Give me 1 minute more. All right. All right. See you in 20. This is weird. Yes. I think I'm going to pause my recording for a little bit. Recording again. Wow, that was odd. You know, I think I'm the only one new to breakout rooms, and I'm so nerdy that I'm absolutely thrilled by the option. Listen, folks, what I really wanted out of that was a chance for you guys to have more conversation amongst each other, and a way to get a little bit of early support. You know, honestly, it would be great if I could arrange private meetings with everybody, even where I could just focus on you. It's not possible, you know, given what we have. But I do want to say something to you, though, just to be fair about it. You know, your folks who are just showing up, don't worry about it. I've not said anything urgent since the breakout room, so you're fine, right? Just want to say a couple quick things to everybody who's here. Just want to mention, you know, as the tour guide of this show, I went to undergrad at School of Visual Arts. School at the time is very, very similar to what I see here at FIT. But we never had any private time with the teachers. There were no office hours. There was no email. It was literally just what you got in the classroom. That was it. Not once in 4 years did I ever talk to a teacher about my work outside of class. Not that I'm saying that's right. It's just that's what's available. And yet those who really were driven succeeded. And so this environment does indeed work, as difficult as it might sometimes seem. Okay, so I visited all 5 of the breakout rooms just for a minute, like a disembodied spirit jumping from room to room. And maybe I just got lucky. You know, in all 5 cases, what was on screen looked great. You know, in all five, really. And so if I hope each of you got to take a turn. I know that's hard to organize. We'll be doing that again next time, and I'll be better at it. Maybe together we could figure out how to share that time better. Or, by the way, would you have liked more time for that particular shared support? Anybody?
I think my group got it done like in the like right amount of time, but like I don't know. It was just
fit.
It was nice to like break out into groups and talk.
Was it? Did the rest of you feel similarly?
Yes.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah. Oh, great. So listen, don't be shy when you're the outlier if you ever feel different. You know what I mean? We're adults. We're in a democracy. We could talk a little bit just to know, like if you're like 5 minutes more would have been great, or 5 minutes less would have been fine. 20 was good. All right, listen, again, remember, you could always email me if you're more comfortable telling me something, because your insights really help. And thanks again for speaking up, Rob. So the work looked great. Listen, I got to tell you something, though. I have great techniques to share with you today. A little bit of review stuff, lots of new stuff. Not one of these things is crazy complicated, right? But they each bear thought. Those of you who take notes, you're probably going to want to take some notes. Those of you who don't take notes, you might want to just glance at the clock and figure out where in the YouTube video is going to be the part that you want. We're 1 hour in right now, because it's a bunch of different things. I want to jump right to it, right? So I'm going to turn my screen sharing back on. My turn. And I'm going to just make some room for us here. And I want to talk to you about something that I never talked about before, which is how to work with patterns in this program. Now, I want to say very quickly, I have my doubts as to how much you need patterns for this project, project 3, right? But you might, and you might just want them. And what do I mean by that? You know, when you go and you pick your clothes for the day, sometimes you pick something with a pattern on it. Maybe it's got repeat floral pattern on it. Somebody designed that, right? Or let's say your room has wallpaper. It doesn't look like any of your rooms have wallpaper, but maybe some wallpaper where some room does. Again, that's classic Illustrator stuff. You know, we happen to be at a school that, you know, has very famous fashion departments, and there are people there who are learning Illustrator just to make the patterns. Now, most of us aren't intending on using patterns that way. But say you need an illustration. You got somebody who's just got back from Hawaii. He's probably going to be wearing one of those Hawaii shirts, which always has a pattern on it. So there's many, many ways to use it. Let's just get a feel for it. So let me just move things around a little bit. Everyone's got Illustrator open, I believe. So here we are in Illustrator. I'm going to close this very fine image. And I think for right now, I'm okay with a letter size document. So let's just open up a standard page. I'm just going to click create. And if you chose a different size this time, it really doesn't matter. Could everybody just draw a kind of fairly large rectangle? So, you know, when we first got started, we were dealing mostly with flat swatches. So we're using flat colors across the board. And I keep on telling you almost every week, open up your Swatches palette. Again, that's from the window menu, which is in alphabetical order. And I usually ask you to open up the color palette, which is also open from the window menu. Thing is, since you're using the same computer, Illustrator might just open up the way you left it with those things out. But what I'd like you to do is be sure you have the Swatches palette out right now, because I want to show you not flat colors, not gradients just now, right? But this. Now, this is a pattern that came built in, and so is this. Now, currently, there's just 2 patterns on this particular default Swatches palette. And look what happens if you went ahead and made your box bigger, right? So in this case, the pattern is scaling up. Now, I want to ask you something. Did you find that pattern? Now, if you did, could you take your black arrow, if necessary, because the rectangle tool might let you do it. I'd like you to make the rectangle bigger. And I want to ask everybody in here if we're getting the same behavior. Is the pattern growing? Are the parts getting larger? So how many of you are seeing your images get bigger as you stretch the box out? Nobody?
I
So
have
here's
a
the
different
thing.
pattern.
You have a different what?
I have like a bluish pattern, like and like
Okay.
it's like not getting bigger, but like it's extending, like a
It's
new
extending.
part, like a
So
new
well
part of the
put.
pattern showing up.
So that's what I want to show you really. How do you control whether it grows, whether it magnifies, or whether it shows more pattern? So I want to show what I mean by that. And I'd like you to join me for a minute. So I'd like you to go up to the black arrow, but oddly, I want you to double click it. So we're talking about the black arrow and I want you to double click it. So this arrow here, we've never looked at the options before, right? Even though we use it all the time. And you usually don't need it, right? But here you see where it says transform patterns. I'm going to turn mine off. Now, if yours is already off, leave it off for a minute. Just leave that one off, right? No check on transform patterns and click OK. Now, if anyone missed it, I double click to get here and I'm just asking you to be sure this is off. So I'm going to OK it. Now what I want to do is see when I scale it, how it behaves. Now this used to be the default, right? And you might like it. It just basically means show me more pattern, right? The pattern itself does not get larger. There's just more of it. You know, it's interesting. This version gives us a little more freedom. If I go back and double click it, the same black arrow, and turn on transform pattern, when I click OK, now when I make it larger, I get to keep the amount of pattern I had. I'm just scaling it up. Small point, not likely to be the first thing that interests you, but in this version, I was surprised by it. Just yesterday, I was playing with patterns. I was like, what just happened? It never used to behave like that. It always behaved like this feature is. Hang on a second here. The old default was this was off. So for today, let's just turn it off now. So we're all on the same page. We've got transform pattern off. Click OK. Let's just leave it off. And that means basically it's going to always be the same size. Does that make any amount of sense? You guys okay with that? So again, that's all about just double clicking the black arrow really. I want to move on though to patterns, where they are and how you make your own. So let's move forward. Okay, so the problem with the Swatches palette is it's got a very small number of examples. It's got the worst set of crayons I've ever seen, you know, a dozen crayons. It's got a couple gradients that I don't even like, and a couple of patterns that I don't particularly like either, right? So in the bottom left corner of the Swatches palette is something that looks like a tiny library. Those are supposed to be little books next to each other, right? Can you click on that icon? So again, you have to have the Swatches palette out. All right, I'm not talking about this palette right now. In the lower left corner of the Swatches palette, click this. Now, these are all kinds of awesome swatches that you could open. This is the first time I want to go over it with you, but could you go all the way down to patterns? I want you to go, please join me exactly, down to patterns, basic graphics. And you'll see even in there, we want basic graphics, dots. And it opens up a new set of swatches. So before we go any further, right, I want to point out many palettes have that little library icon. It just means there's more stuff for you to pick from. So if it was brushes, you'd find all kinds of cool brushes in the library icon. And swatches, all kinds of swatches. That includes gradients and other types of colors and all kinds of cool stuff. But right now I want to focus on dots because artists have a long history of working with dots. So I want to focus on that a little bit. All right. So if you've still got your rectangle out, please click it. Make sure that the fill box is in front. Remember that, I'm always saying that. Look in the bottom of your toolbar to see if it's in front. And then try out some of these. Now we're going to speed read this together, but first off, I want to make sure, did everyone find the dots? Okay. Now, these patterns don't have a background. These particular ones, the dots, have no background. I'd like you to try this with me. I want you to get your rectangle tool, and I want you to put a rectangle over most of the earlier one and fill it with a color. So basically asking you to kind of hide most of the other rectangle and give it a flat color. Then I want you to send it to the back. I'm trying to make a point. Do you remember Command left bracket? I think most of you do, right? Or Control left bracket. Again, if there were 100 things there, I would probably do Command Shift left bracket to send it all the way to the back if necessary. So what I'm trying to say is I use a lot of patterns with other boxes that are identical. It might be that face you always see me draw, and I might put a layer that's got a color, another one, a copy of the same drawing, right? With dots or lines or something else on top. Sometimes I'll put a third thing on top of that. I make a sandwich out of it, and just layers of effects. Okay. I want you to quickly notice something about this Swatch library. So let's go over something. You clicked here to get at it. So you started with the Swatches palette. There are other ways, right? This is the way I'm going to do it all semester, though. You click the little library icon, you pick your library. We went right to patterns to basic graphics. But here's where it gets cool. Once you have any of these libraries open, any Swatch library, these have a double arrow at the bottom. See what happens if you click the load next arrow. Lines. Try out a set of lines or two. You know what, actually, I'm going to Command Z that because I'd rather you select the box that's in front, right? So again, if necessary, turn the upper box, the box on top. It's a little hard to tell, right? The last one you drew, right? And, make sure it still has a flat color and then click on the other box. So here we could see the way the patterns look. I don't want to spend too long on the lines though. So let's go back down to the bottom of this library and click that right side arrow again. Basic graphic textures. Now, some of these might actually be useful for this project. It really depends on what object you're drawing. These to me look just like architect's textures. If you ever look at a blueprint, sometimes they have areas that use textures. I'm not crazy about these, but sometimes they're useful. All right, for a moment, I'd like you to just click through these on your own, right? You'll see that there are these patterns here, and I'm just gonna comment, and I don't mind if you're looking at the same ones as me. I'm in the one right now called Decorative Legacy. I'm not a big fan of these except on rare occasion, and one of the reasons is it's just so clearly, it's like someone else's statement. The chance of whoever drew this, their vision matching mine seems kind of slim. But if you find use for this and it doesn't overtake your artwork, why not? Why not? I have nothing against it. They just never work for me in my own artwork. They might work for you. So you'll see there's just lots of choices, and they're really just, rather varied. Every version has, and I never saw this one. This is a new one. The animal skins, this is supposed to be a giraffe skin. I actually used it on a giraffe. I was never really happy with it though. All right. So I'm going to back up a little bit because we're not going to get to talk about libraries much, right? You could, on your own time, try out all the libraries. Take a mental note of any that just knock you out. There's a lot, right? I'm just focusing on patterns today. I want to show you a couple ways that you can have more control though, right? So let's take a look. I want to show you guys something that's a little odd about the way this program behaves. Could you look at the main swatches panel and notice that everything you just clicked has shown up as part of the swatches, right? So that means we don't really need the libraries out anymore if we're going to use the swatches you tried. Could you find the dots you tried earlier on the main swatches panel? And I'd like you to pick one that has large dots, something like this. All right. I want to tell you what we're about to do. I want to show you how you'd make your own version of that particular pattern, right? Now, listen, I want to be very frank with you, though. The last couple versions of Illustrator has added many wonderful features to patterns, pattern making. There's even something now called pattern, I think it's pattern edit mode, you know. And I'm not sure we're going to have time to go into pattern edit mode. I want to get the subject started and then we'll see what we need. So one way to make your own version of a pattern is this. You guys ready? Right, this is very different and you're going to need to focus with me on this. So you chose a pattern from here, but we want to change the color of the dots. So again, I'm asking you to be sure that you choose one with large dots. If you're not seeing it on the Swatches palette, you can go back to your library and back up all the way to basic graphics dots. So I'm saying the fourth or fifth one, big dots. Okay, I'm going to show you how to edit it. So join me now. I want you to go to the Swatches panel, find the pattern that interests you, and watch this. I'm going to press on it and drag it right out, and I'm dropping it on the stage. I want you to choose a similar one, simple one, large black dots. Press on it and drag and drop it somewhere where you have room on the stage. I want to zoom in on it, and luckily Illustrator will zoom in on whatever is selected if you use Command plus or Control plus. So you dragged it out, it's automatically selected. Can you Command plus to zoom in, or Control plus if you're on Windows? Okay, this is a group. Yeah, I've not talked about groups enough in this class, to be honest, right? So right now, though, I'm going to just sort of jump over the fence and say, the black arrow isn't going to help you, right? It's just going to move the whole tile around. You need the white arrow. Can everyone get the white arrow? All right. I want you to click on this one on the left edge and change the fill color. So make sure you know that the fill box is in front and give it whatever fill color you feel like giving it. Just don't use a pattern to fill a pattern, right? And we want to take that whole left side and change those colors. They don't have to be the same color. Now, I want to show you guys something. I'm going to make this quick. It's just an introduction. There's an inner box here that's showing you where this pattern's actually cut off. It's actually the inside box, which is called the bounding box. So you'll notice the bounding box cuts right through the three I just asked you to change. And the reason being, the next tile is going to go next to it, and then the next tile next to it. So what's going to finish this yellow one, for example, is this one. This is the left side of it. This is only going to produce the right side. So what I want you to do is go to the right side and match the colors you use. So again, that's going to be the white arrow. The black arrow shows you the whole thing with the bounding box, but the white arrow lets you work on it. So I'm going to ask you to
I missed this step.
Did you?
I'm like, I made a box, but I don't think that's what you did.
No, watch me.
Okay.
Right? The thing was, you dragged a pattern out of the library. Now, I shouldn't say library, because I don't think it lets you do it. The Swatches panel. So you drag it out. They both might let you do it, but you have to drag it out. Right?
Got it.
Then deselect it and get the white arrow.
Okay.
Okay. So what I was saying was, take the left ones and change their colors. I have a specific reason why I'm saying the left ones, right? So I wouldn't jam on this, right? This is what you want. Then I want you to go to the right edge and imitate those colors. So this one's imitating what I did on the left here. This one here is imitating this one. And I'm going to break my own rule on the last one to show you why it's a rule. This one's not going to match the left side one, right? So I'm going to, and if you want to do it just to see for yourself, by all means, you could actually add this is the only green one I've got. All right. So you pulled out a pattern tile, which essentially made a copy of it so you could edit it. Now to turn it back into a pattern, here's the next step. So guys, whatever you change now has to be enough, right? Because we don't have too long for this topic. So you have to switch back to the black arrow because now you want the whole thing. Watch this weird move. I'm pressing on it and I'm dragging it back onto the swatches panel. There's my new swatch, just showed up. It won't let you drag it on the library. It says, nope, can't do it. But you can drag it onto the swatches panel. All right, once you've dragged it on, you should see it on the swatches panel. And that means that you can zoom back out, choose something, and try it out. Now, I totally messed mine up because of that green, right? So if I zoom in here, you'll see that doesn't look right. So I want to make a small point about how this is going to behave, and we're going to make one more to try it out. You can go back down to the tile that you have, right? And again, even if you got lost, just come back down to that tile with me again, right? And zoom in on it. So I'm going to click it with my black arrow and then use Command+ to zoom in. So here's the lowdown. To really get good at this, you have to know where they repeat. So the easiest ones are the outside. If you want them to match, should look like this. So folks, this is a kind of a crash course on the concept. The corner here, this one, I'm going to get my wide arrow to choose it, has to match this because it'll be next to that one as the tiles repeat. But it also has to match this one because the tiles might stack on top of each other. This one here would then wind up being up here. So to make them match. Now again, if you want to just play it easy for today, you can make all four corners the same. These are the hardest ones to think about, really. These two can be the same. And just for experiment's sake, let's make this one here match this one on the bottom. I'm going to show you something simpler because I think this is probably unnecessarily complex. I'm trying to point out that these are the seams of the tile. Imagine you were putting down a kitchen floor, you know. The thing that's a little bit more complex than the kitchen floor, I'm going to click with the black arrow so you can see. This left edge is cut. This one's cut in half. This side here is going to have to match this one. These are worse though, because these only a quarter of it is part of it, right? It's going to match partially to this, partially to this one. These in the middle, you can do whatever you want with those because they're not going to, they're complete. They're not cut off at all. If this is too complicated for you, don't worry about it. Oops, don't do that. I just switch to my wide arrow every time I want to make a change. These could look like anything. We're about to make your own, and I'm going to show you a simpler way to handle this. I'm just showing you. The ones on the inside are free, right? They're not cut off by the bounding box, right? So these guys are never going to touch anything. They're always independent. Let's see what you got. So what we're going to have to do is drag it back on to the Swatches palette. Get the black arrow, click it, and drag it back onto here. Thing is, don't forget, that was just you making the tool. You haven't actually used it, right? So what I'm going to do is zoom back out. I, by the way, often do Command-0 or Control-0 to see the whole page. I want to select this big box now and try out my new pattern. See how much better this one looks? I had to think about those dots quite a bit to make sure they were seamless. Now, guys, listen, don't get hung up on that. If it interests you, you'll play with it and learn a lot on your own, right? The first step was you drag something out, which allowed you to make your own copy, and you made changes to it. I want to show you now how you'd make one of your own, right? Now, this, again, if you're looking for total seamless tiles where no one could tell where your edges are, you're going to need to spend a lot of time on your own, right? It's a large topic. And again, it's more for people who make wallpaper and who make patterns for garments than it is for folks like myself, for illustrators. But I want to show you what I've got. All right, we could delete this little one down here. Oops. And I'm going to try mine with the pencil tool. You know what? Somebody was mentioning the pencil tool earlier, so let's do it that way. Could you find your pencil tool? Again, if you can't find it, just hit the letter N. I'm going to set mine to ultra smooth right now. I found my pencil tool. I'm going to double click it because I think for this little experiment, smooth as it can go might be good. I double clicked the pencil tool right on the toolbar to get here, and I drag this over to smooth. Let's click OK. I want to show what I've got in mind. I'm going to just make a smooth curve like that. And, you know, with the pen tool, I could have been more exact because this one here, I'd like it to touch this one when the tile repeats. But that's going to take a little bit of effort. So right now we're going to wing it. So you drew something like that. I'd like you to go to the Properties palette, see where it says Stroke, and give it some stroke weight. So you got yourself a smooth pencil. By the way, you could do this with a jagged one. Wouldn't really hurt you, right? And then I want you to change the stroke weight, and I'm using the Properties palette for that right here. All right. I would like for you then to option drag a copy. Try to keep it very straight. And maybe a third one. And a fourth. Let's see what this looks like as a pattern. All right, this time we're not editing one, right? We're just making our own, right? We just drew something that has its own repeat, and we want to see how it looks repeating more, even more than that, right? So get your black arrow, select all your lines, and drag it on the Swatches palette. Like, I just want to be fair. So the whole idea was this. Give me a second. You drew one thing you wanted to repeat, and you option dragged a few, or alt dragged on Windows. You take your black arrow and select them all, and drag them on to make a tile out of it. There it is, just showed up. So I'm going to try it on this. My own fill. Ooh, that is huge. Why is it so huge? I'm going to double click my black arrow here and see if it's about all this. I think that pattern is just too big. So what can I do about it? Right? I just made it too big. Just got overexcited. I'm going to make a new one that's smaller. I'm going to use my black arrow, select the old one, scale it down. That looks about as big as the one we stole earlier. Guys, I don't mean to be overly complex. They've changed the way this tool works. I do like the changes, but there were many. So my lines just got thicker than I want. If you're okay with it, you could drag it on. If you're not, my black arrow and double click it and say, all right, don't transform the pattern. Don't transform anything. It's actually this is not a pattern yet, so I don't want to mix too many subjects. It's more about this one, but I think this will do. Let's take it, drag it on. I got a different version of my pattern. I'm going to try it on this guy. I want to try one more again, and here's my goal. There's infinite number of demonstrations we could try. We're just talking about how you could make a pattern of your own. One thing we just learned is small's a lot better. I want to make one a little bit differently, and we're going to make it out of rectangles and ovals, right? I want you to see how it's going to behave on your own. I'm going to delete this little stack I made here. All right, everybody, find yourself some room, right? And I want you to note the size that I'm working now. I'm making this very, very small. Now you're going to choose your own fills, whether you want a stroke or not. And I'm basically asking you to kind of draw a sort of random set of elements out of rectangles and maybe some ellipses. And we're going to see how it behaves. So we're not being too strategic, and you don't always want to be. You can change colors. Strokes are acceptable if you want to use strokes. All right. Hang on 1 second here. I'm sorry. I have to. Can't take this out. All right. Mine looks too big. You know, really, I can't really give you a best size, to be honest with you, right? But I'm going to go small. Small is definitely going to be more useful to me. All right, once I think I've got it in line, I'm going to take the whole thing and drag it on. So this is a repeat idea, to create a pattern tile of your own. You draw something small, you drag it on, you see the pattern's there, and then try it. Delete this thing that may be confusing people. So this is the way that one repeats. And it repeats fairly well. I gave it a lot of room between the shapes. And it looks pretty useful. All right, I'm gonna need to move off the subject a little bit. So I wanna say this. You may not ever wanna copy an existing pattern, right? Like we did the first time where we dragged it out, right? I do, just because mostly I use the dots, right? So I often work with those dot patterns. You might prefer to make a pattern of your own. No, that was fairly easy. You just drew it small, dragged it on, and it became a swatch. And you could use it on anything. Does anybody have any questions about patterns?
Mine didn't become a pattern. When I tried to extend it, it just became bigger and it didn't add any more shapes.
Got it. So that's really been throwing me because Illustrator didn't used to behave this way. So I'm warming up to it also. But here's the premise though. If your pattern was small, so here, just take a look at my whole page so you can get the scale, right? This is very small from the looks of it, less than an inch, right? And you drag it on, right? Then your best bet might be to start with a fresh rectangle. And you could use any of the patterns, of course, but we're talking about the newest one.
Oh, you're really muffled at the moment.
What's that? I'm muffled?
Oh, you were, sorry.
I was, okay. So we're starting with a new shape to fill it, right? So I made a small tile and I put it on a big shape. And I have to admit, this one's clearly scaled up. So I'm a little surprised by that. You know, let's see if it scales up still, but it's not. So the only thing that's kind of interesting is I don't have any science for you to show you how your original tile size is going to relate to the way that it's used. But when I expand it, it's not getting bigger. That, again, is going to be about the black arrow, right? If transform pattern is off, whatever size you get when you first see it is going to stay that way when you make the object larger. I don't know if that helped at all, Leah. We may need to return to this. It did. All right, great. So guys, again, I don't see this as a huge player for most of you on this particular project, but I really don't know. I've tried to make wood grain this way. You know, by the way, it's a fierce challenge making wood grain. I have succeeded at water so that I could keep changing the size of a shape that's supposed to look like the ocean. But these things are really very challenging. So I want to drop the subject by saying something that we're not going to go into, which is pattern editing mode. So if anyone's really hungry for patterns, want to really learn every detail about it, that's what you want to look up right now, pattern editing mode. If there's time over the semester, we could return, I'll give you a peek at it. But for our type of work, for most of us, it's not time well spent. All right, I want to move on to the next thing then. Let's leave what we have out. I want to show you guys something. I want to talk to you about another fill option. So we started the semester just with flat fills, right? And we're just talking about color, flat colors. And then we moved into gradients. So we will be coming back to gradients soon. right? But now we just added patterns. Well, what else is there? You know, there's transparency and blending modes. Now, you've probably used, some of you use transparency in Illustrator already, and a lot of you have used it in Photoshop. Same goes for blending modes. Blending modes behave in a really interesting way. So I'm going to ask everybody to join me on this next exercise. Let's open up a new document. I think that's for the best. I'd like you to grab the pencil tool. If you'd like to change its options, double click it. I'm going to go back here. This is too smooth for actually drawing in many cases. Then I'm going to click OK. I'd like you to draw a profile for me like we sometimes do. Oops. And what's most important is that you close it. Right, so this is open. This is not going to help me. So I have to close it. And if you want to make any last changes at any point with the pencil tool, you could come back in and modify it. It's one of the beautiful things about the pencil tool. Okay. Now, I'd like you to fill it with a flat color. I'm going to fill mine with yellow. I'm going to get my black arrow and I'm going to scale it. What I'd like for you to do is get it small enough that you could option drag 6. Ooh, that was weird. So this is what I want once you've got 6 copies. I'd like for you to set up the top row so that they each have a different color, right? So I'm actually going to do red, blue, and yellow. In the bottom row, I'm going to try a couple stranger things. I'm going to use this gradient here on one. I'm going to put a pattern on this one. I'm going to take this one here and fill it with just with black, I think. You want some kind of variety. So you drew one, you gave him different kind of fills, because what we're going to do is a trick that I just nicknamed the veil. So if you had a veil over your face and it was semi-transparent, say it was a blue veil, right? All your skin, whatever features could be seen, if it was transparent enough, would be kind of bluish, right? But Illustrator gives us more options for our veils. So what we need to do next is this. I want you to get the rectangle tool. And I want you to make a big rectangle that almost covers everything. Almost, but not quite. I'm letting some stuff peek out just to make my point. We want to see how the veil trick actually behaves. So we're leaving a little bit visible so we could compare. Now, what happened? Just lost everybody. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you just cut out for a quick second.
Yeah.
Just for a quick second. All right. So the thing is, the veil itself is going to have a large effect on what's underneath it. Don't make it a pattern. Don't make it a gradient this time. It's possible, but I want a flat color. If you want to join me as closely as possible, make yours magenta like mine. Now, one thing I've been wanting to show you for a while now, I'm going to take advantage of this right now, is this. A lot of features exist on the Properties palette and also on another palette. So what I want to point out right now is I've got the Transparency palette here, right, which looks like this. I'm going to put mine away because I want to show you something. But on the Properties palette, it says opacity here. Look what happens if I click it. That looks just like the Transparency palette. So some people prefer to do this kind of thing right from the Properties palette. Click this. But I don't want to be that complicated, so I'm going to get the actual palette itself. Why don't you join me? Can you go to the window menu and get transparency? If you like it, it won't take you long to adapt to doing it from here. But right now, let's leave it out. It has a couple choices more. All right, before we go anywhere, make sure you've got your box selected, your veil. Make sure that the fill color is in front. We're only talking about fills right now. And I want you to take opacity here and lower it down. I'm going to go around about the middle. Now, is there anything wrong with that? Here it is a little higher. No, except for that, it's kind of milky. You know, I don't really like that look. You know, sometimes I'll do this because someone drew a forest and it's just too complicated. I'll put a veil over it to try to make it less complex, but I don't really like the way it looks at the low opacity right now. So I'm going to ask you to raise it back up to 100. I want to compare opacity, which is cool, I'll admit it, to this on the left, which in some ways is cooler. Could you click on this part that says normal? If anyone got lost, we're using the transparency palette and it came from the window menu. Right? All right. I want you to click here. These are called blending modes, and I want you to try the top 3. Here's darken, right? And indeed, everything got darker. Here's multiply. And in this particular case, they look very similar. They look the same. And here's color burn. And that looked a little different. A couple of the colors seem to have been ignored. So I want to make a point about blending modes. Those 3 are a category of darkening blending modes. Their main role in life is to make things darker, but they don't make things milky. They respect the color underneath in a variety of ways that are slightly different, but they all aim at making things dark. Most of them will flat out ignore white completely, right? Now, multiply is my favorite. On this particular set, they look the same. I want to compare it. So let's come down here and try the next 3. These 3 are all different lightening blending modes. They make things lighter. So here's lighten. This one clearly doesn't ignore white. It ignored a lot of my fill colors though. I'm going down to screen. Very similar in this case. And color dodge. A little more subtle, and I do use this one. I want to compare all of these to the next set down. These 3 are incredibly useful, all 3 of them. They're harder to describe though. They don't actually lean on dark or lean on light specifically. They each kind of mix colors using a different set of math, a different algorithm. So let's choose overlay. Now this one's kind of easy to see what it's doing. It's interesting to me that it's having no effect on my blue head or my yellow head. It doesn't look like it's affecting the red one either. Let's move on then. Here's soft light. And hard light should look different. Hard light didn't work at all. Now I want to get complex for a second. Sometimes the mode is not mixing with the items underneath it in a way that seems right. And I'll notice some of them will behave better at a lower opacity. So I'm going to try hard light at a lower opacity. So here it is. I'm in hard light, and I'm going to lower the opacity down. And I'm still not liking it. I'm just going to drop it. I want to come back up to 100. Please go back up to 100 with me. And then move on. These next 2, I just want to show you, they're specialty blend modes. Here's difference. Here's exclusion. I'm not going to use these much. And in fact, I want to drop it right now. The ones I'd ask you to kind of focus on would probably be multiply and say screen. Let's go to multiply together, and I want to try something. Multiply might be the most popular blending mode. People often use it to make shadows. So they mix dark grays and grayish gradients with the floor to show the shadow of someone walking. So multiply is possibly the most popular. It's surely the one I use the most. We're on multiply right now, and I chose magenta to start. Would it act differently if I chose a different color? Well, of course it would. So let's try that out. Still selected. You should still have the fill box in front. Transparency set to multiply. at 100% opacity. And I'd like you to just randomly try other colors for that box and see where you like it and where you don't. Now here's the light colors, and I'm not really getting such great mileage out of the light color. It depends. Once I head into the midtones, they seem to behave. I love the way it's casting a shadow on this guy, which is looking great over that gradient. I'll often use multiply, but you could try other colors. You know, someone might be outside. You want to show that they're casting a lot of blue, you know, receiving a lot of blue light from the sky. One way to get to know blending modes is to just focus on multiply for a while. It's such a good one. And can you fill it with gradients? Can you fill it with patterns? Short answer, yes. Longer answer is, obviously, it gets complex. But since we're here, let's try it. I'm going to click a couple of the gradients that are already there. So here's multiply at 100 with this gradient. I'm not too thrilled with it. Here it is with this one. It's pretty interesting to see how that affects it. It's natural. Here it is with a pattern. Look at what's happening to this guy. I know that's a weird one. I want to show you something kind of quickly. I'm making a copy. You don't have to join me on this one. I just want to show you something. If I took one person and copied it, right, I could actually use the top one for a blending mode. So if I took this top one here and set it to multiply and tried a different color, you could see it has, you know, quite a bit of effect on the color beneath it. Here it is with a gradient. Look at this. Here it is with a pattern. So sometimes I will actually do this, right? I'll take a shape, make an exact copy of it, because I want to blend a certain pattern or gradient with another color. Food for thought. Got to warn you though, it does get complicated. You know, one would really like to be comfortable with the layers palette doing this kind of thing. You know, I will occasionally stack 3, probably never more than that, of the exact same shape. So it's really easy to forget which one is doing what. I want to back off, and I just want to say this much. Honestly, I think you could be excellent at Adobe Illustrator without blending modes. And if one did want to ignore it at some length, you could. But at some point, it's going to come along and save the day or just change something. If you're doing a complex illustration, sometimes things get too complex. Again, imagine Little Red Riding Hood, right? And you're the one drawing the forest. You know, forests can get very complicated. You know, unless you're very careful about the colors you use to draw that forest, the forest might compete with the star of the show. You know, maybe there's just too many shapes going on back there, too much activity. It's competing with Little Red Riding Hood. So what I'll sometimes do is put a veil over the entire landscape. I want to show you something.
Is there a way to show that like 2 colors make one? Like say I would have like a blue square and a red square, and then the overlapping area would be like purple, since blue and red make purple.
Are you guys hearing me okay? I don't know if that was, did you hear Adi just now? Like she cut out for me.
Sorry.
I can hear Adi.
Adi, can you just say that one more time?
Yeah, I was wondering, like, say I wanted to show that like 2 primary colors made a different color. So like I put blue and red or something like next to each other, and then I wanted them to overlap to make purple. Is there a mode that does that?
There is a couple of modes that might help. So I want to do something like that. Oops, sorry. I meant to copy that. There we go. Really, I'm never really too happy with these reds. So here we go. Let's take a look. So one of the things to remember, it's the color on the object on top that controls it. And one thing that I have to get back to, and I hate this because they really shouldn't have done this, but in the last two versions, the next shape you draw adopts the last blending mode you used. So I'm actually in multiply right now, which I don't even want to be. So one thing you got to keep an eye out for when you draw a new shape, look on your transparency palette, right? If it says a blending mode, you're not really getting the honest color. I can go back to normal. So here's what you'd expect. Yellow one and a red one. This one had inherited the last blending mode, but I changed it back. The question was, how would I make them blend, say, to emphasize color theory? The first ones I would try would probably be hue or color at the bottom. I'm going to see if they work. Here's hue. Well, that didn't work because I wanted orange in here. Not really right. Here's color, and it's still not working. So the truth of it is, each of these has a nature of its own that's stopping that really excellent question from being satisfied. And I'm a little surprised by that none of them are giving me what I want. The stacking order, you know, which one's on top will help, but I'm just utterly not happy with any of these. So I have to say, Adi, I really thought for sure that either you or color was going to do it, but it didn't. So I have to admit, I guess the answer is no on that question, unfortunately. I want to back out of this, though. I wanted to show you something quickly, and let me see if I can do that. I want to show you something here, just food for thought, and then we're going to move forward a bit. So here's a bunch of heads, just like you drew, and I just want you to see what's going on. So on the top, I've got 4 heads. One is mostly a gradient with a pattern, a little piece of pattern on top. Here's another one, different gradient with the same piece of pattern on top. Here's a flat color. This one's got all pattern. Now, behind the whole thing is this little landscape, right? Sort of green to a yellower green. Above the landscape, I popped the veil. Now, by itself, it looks like that. It's just a box. And I'm selecting it to show you something. This is using hue, right? The one I just mentioned to Adi, and it's set to 100%. If I show you with the mountains behind it, look what it did to the mountains. So it means even if all those mountains had been different colors, they were somehow absorbed into this particular hue that I chose. And if I switch to multiply, it's nighttime because that's a darkening mode. Here's lightning modes, too light. None of these are really producing anything. So that's okay. It's always going to be about the combination of elements that you chose. So it really does take a lot of experimenting. And I want to reassure everybody to be clear about something. Hard light didn't help at all. Maybe it will at a lower opacity. Wow. So I got to say something. The moral of the story is this was made for artists, and it is not like science in the usual way. I don't think you're ever going to be able to describe to somebody exactly what each blending mode does. And if you look them up online, you're going to hear techies out there explaining it. And it's going to be things like, well, multiply blending mode compares the upper pixel to the lower pixel. And if the lower pixel is lighter, it does this, but excludes black or white. And you're like, what the hell? The only way to get it is experiments like these. Do a bunch of drawing, pop a veil on top, try different blending modes. So I did it in this case because now if I show you the upper layer, the heads are clean. They're not blended, right? It's just all for the sake of making those mountains look different. All right, here's my only worry for those of you who are going to play with it. I want to go back to the file that we were, all kind of working together. If I change a blending mode on one thing, even though this is like probably the least satisfying of any demonstration that I did today. So yeah, let's try it like that. There we go. Right, so this is sort of blending with the yellow. The next thing I draw is also going to have multiply on it. Look at that. I don't want it to do that. Why would it assume that I'm going to stay in this kind of fringy blend? So you just have to keep your eye on that. If that happens, get your transparency palette out. Make sure the fill box is in front and your object is selected. Same rules, but just go back and set it to normal. So folks, this is what I'm hoping happens today, right? We're going to go over a bunch of different techniques, right? And you're going to take, notes, and the ones that appeal to you most get the biggest note and the biggest thumbs up, and you're going to spend your time there. No one needs to know all of Illustrator to be great. Look, I want to move forward, and I know you guys kind of need a break. Maybe we could do that now, but I want to say something quickly. So there's this fella on YouTube named Brushy One String. Brushy could play guitar like no tomorrow. And this guy is just flat out amazing. And you can guess why they call him Brushy One String? Yeah, his guitar has one string. And even now that planet Earth has discovered Brushy One String, he's not buying the other strings. I think he was flat out broke, and that's how the whole thing got started. With one string, he could outplay most guitar players you're ever going to meet. I'm hoping you could tell why I'm telling you this story. If any of these features today are just completely wrong for you, put them on hold. What the hell? Make great art without it. Right? Let me just get a look at the handout before we see what's available for us as a break. Let's see now. I'm only 15 minutes off schedule. No, I'm not. I'm further off schedule than that. All right. This is going to have to be a very short break. This is like a bathroom run style break. It is roughly 10:55. I want to start at 5 after 11. So it's just shy of 10 minutes, right? Do whatever you need to do quickly, splash some water in your face, down a coffee, whatever it is. I'll see you guys at 5 after 11. Don't be late, especially those of you who were late this morning. All right, see you at 5 after 11. I do want to move on topics, but I just want to back up to just clarify our sense of proportion, really. Patterns and blending modes, right? Those are the two big subjects today, newer topics. Patterns, do they make or break your work? No, not really. I could show you any number of artists who you probably know and love that never used a pattern. On the other hand, I could also show you artists that use patterns all the time. So I just want to quickly give you a peek at something. I'm going to make this as short as I can. I want to see if I could find a good quick example for you. Oh, some of this stuff is for adult eyes only. I should have screened this. But some of these artists, very fond of patterns, right? You see in a lot of traditional Japanese art, a lot of patterns. This guy, this fella is Utamaro. Again, is someone who's really motivated by pattern making. This is Hakusai. A lot of you guys have seen the wave before. I want to find one of his more pattern-oriented projects. Yeah, these are beautiful. Again, though, no patterns. So again, you have to figure out how these things fit for you. These examples are not coming up strong. I'm going to move forward. All right, the other one was blending modes. And I want to say honestly, I've done a lot of blending modes professionally. I did, illustration without blending modes. I did a couple of little children's books, very scholastic kind of stuff, actually for the company called Scholastic, and where I really didn't need blending modes. It was later on for some work of my own I actually did. So again, these are a little fringy and I want to be very inclusive this semester. I want to move forward though. So again, you can experiment with those as you see fit. I want to go over a little bit of and if your computer is feeling slow today, and I don't mean your internet connection, I mean the computer itself, feel free to close up, any of the things that we just did. One thing that might be helpful though is if you do have a head handy, select a head and Command C. Then if you want to close these documents, you can. We're just going to paste it on a new document. So I'm just doing this really so that people are not using up all their RAM by leaving lots of stuff open. Let's open up a plain old letter size document. If you did just copy ahead, paste it now. And I want you to check on a couple of things before we go forward. If your transparency palette is still out, that's good. If not, let's go to the window menu and get it. It's alphabetical order. Select your head. Make sure that the fill box is in front. So I always look at the bottom of the toolbar. And then check that your transparency is set back to normal blending mode and 100% opacity. I'm going to drop this subject for a little while, but I want to make sure that you're not working in a different mode without knowing it. That would be very problematic. So normal and 100, I'm going to put this aside. I'd like for you also to start with a flat fill. Okay, there's a couple things I want to clarify about using the freeform gradient, right? I'm going to ask you to watch the first couple things, and then I'm going to tell you when to join me. The first thing about the gradients is the gradient tool on the toolbar is super powerful, but the other features are either going to be on the gradient palette, which you could open now, or on the properties palette. So you'll notice they look very, very similar, but not exactly the same. So I'm going to work with the gradient palette right now. So I got my tool ready. I got my palette ready, and I changed my mind about the fill color. So I am going to first look here. The default is linear. The second one's radial, and the last one's the new flavor. Now, you don't have to join me just yet. I just want to make a small point. So since I'm in the default, as soon as I click, it switched to the last gradient I used, right? Each of these could have a blending mode, transparency, color, gets very complex. This is a simple one, and that's why I like it. I just don't like the number of colors. I'm taking out the ones in the middle. I'll always press and drag, because that's why I like the gradient tool, to figure out how I want to distribute the color. That's all linear. My main argument right now is don't ignore it. Really, you're doing a can of soda, it's probably going to be a linear gradient you need. It's just a column. And a lot of things will work that way, but some won't. So I could switch to radial. So with radial, I'm still going to press and drag. It's just a round gradient. And the first color is where I click, and the last color is where I let go. All right, but we know this already. So what if I go to the last one? Now, what I want to do now, and again, if anyone was just joining me, let's start over. Could you go to a flat color? So I'm going to just go to a medium tone, nothing too light, nothing too dark. All right, so you got a flat color, you change your mind. Now, listen, I got to be frank. This is probably going to rule this project 3, right? And I know somebody in the chat mentioned gradient mesh. So whoever learned gradient mesh, I give you a big thumbs up. This is the competition now. There's 2 forms of fairly free gradient. This new one we're using, which is the most intuitive, and another one we may or may not do as a group. So I want to get to the one we started. All right. Well, I got my gradient palette out. I think I'm going to click this third style before I even get started. And because I did that, I didn't even have to click on the object. The object was selected. Now, if that didn't work for you, you could click on it and switch to here. But I just want to repeat something, a small detail that I didn't mention before. If the object's selected and you want to move to a particular kind of gradient, especially the freeform gradient, just make sure the fill box is in front and the object is selected. I keep saying that, don't I? Select the object, fill box in front. But then just click this one. I'd like you to join me on this. So if I lost you, join me now. You have your head, you got it with a flat color, and you've got your gradient tool ready and the gradient palette. This time to activate the freeform gradient, coming right to the gradient palette and clicking that third little symbol. Now, this is weird because it'll give you different numbers of color points randomly. And it seems the colors it chooses are also random. No big deal. If you like them, you could just move them to where you want, even if they're the wrong colors, just to get started. And then add any where you want by simply clicking to add. Noticing, by the way, we're in the points style, which is the default of a freeform gradient. So you're adding points right now, and you could choose colors in any number of ways using swatches or the color palette. I'm going to focus on my favorite way soon enough. One thing that's worth noticing is whenever you click, it's using the last color you chose. If I suddenly change this, the next one's going to have that color. All right. Remember though, to delete a color, you're still in the gradient tool on the toolbar. You simply click one that you don't want and you press delete. All right. I want to just mention a couple more things about this points method of freeform gradient. Frankly, this goes so far, it might be all you need. It really might be, right? I want to do two or three things that go with it and then mention one detour. Remember also that when you click on one of these, it has this little dot next to it, which is the amount of spread. And it's a very limited spread. This is the maximum spread I just dragged to it, 100%. It says so right here, right? Here's the minimum. But it does help. So feel free to take advantage of it. So you know how to make points on a freeform gradient by just clicking. You know how to delete them by clicking and pressing delete. Right? What about the other style? All right, guys. The other one's taken longer for me to get to know. So this feature is really new, right? And to be honest with you, I was rather fluent at the last method, so I was slow to give it up. But I realized this one is much more intuitive, and I'm on a mission my whole life to find what's most intuitive. And this rocks. So I want to show you the other feature, and again, you're going to choose whether you think you want to use it now or whether you want to put it on hold. This one here, which is lines, right? So if you click, say, toward the back of the head, right? I'd like you to do a couple things with me. One, I'd like you to double click it because this is a fast way to color choices. Notice this on the left. Here's the swatches. This is the same as these. So even if this was put away, I could still get my colors. What I'm trying to say is any point can be double clicked and you could choose whether you want sliders or swatches or whether you want to borrow one of your own colors, which is also cool. All right, that's not new. But what I want to do is make it behave like a line. So I want you to be sure that the one you just made has a color you like, because I want to make a line starting with the exact same color. So if necessary, double click it and change your color. You could hit return to accept it or enter to accept it. But now I want you to go to the gradient palette and choose this feature. We're leaving the default freeform points and we're going to the lines version of points. Now at first you don't see any difference, but look what happens if I click the next, make another point. Oh, hang on a second. That was not satisfying. Got to make sure it's selected. Now, it's, again, this happened to me the other day also. If it didn't work for you either, go back and click it again. Then make sure it says lines. If it doesn't, try it again. Now I'm ready to move forward. And I'm going to click in any place that strikes me as important regarding the contour of the head. By the time I get to the third point, the curve has developed. To finish it, if you don't want to keep going, and this I didn't mention the other day, escape on the keyboard. And that means the next time you move, you're actually making a new one. I'm going to do that whole thing one more time. So I'm going to delete some stuff. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Give me a minute. I'm taking stuff out just to make my point. If you like the linear gradient option, make yourself a color point. Guys, let's just do this one more time, would you? Join me on this. A little finicky. You can move that head over. Option drag yourself a copy and start with a flat fill. You know, here's my experience with it. There are little nuances that are not yet documented, you know, that at least I can't find them. And it gets most complicated when I move back and forth from points to lines. I don't really mind it because I love the results, but it does get a little finicky. Now, right now, I'm just going to move right into lines. So you started with a flat color. You're moving over to the gradient tool, right? And you're going to look at your gradient palette, which I accidentally put aside. There you go. Got my gradient tool ready. I can see my gradient palette out. I'm going to freeform gradient. Now, if it starts with points, you can move right over to lines now if you like, and go ahead and click. I recommend changing that first color right away, any method that you like. And hit return or enter to accept it. Move forward, you're following the contour, you make another point. It looks straight until you hit the third point. And that's pretty awesome. Hit return when you're ready, and you're out of there. Now, because I hit return, I should be able to change my mind. I don't really want this one selected anymore, right? And I can see that, oh, I didn't mean return, I meant escape. It still thinks I'm going to continue it. And I really don't want it to do that. It's the biggest problem I've had with it. So I find the escape key. And you could tell that last dot was not highlighted. I'm free to move forward. So the next one could be either points or lines. Here's points. And I could add points if I want to. So the one big difference, the big discovery, right, is the escape key. Now, I don't know how often you use it, right? On a Mac, it's in the top left corner of the keyboard. And it basically means I'm done with that line. You know, I'm deselecting that particular color stop because I want to start a fresh one. Windows, is anybody in here using Windows? Is the escape key in the same place in the top left corner? It is? Great. Does anybody have any questions for me about gradients? Any kind of gradient? No. No? All right. I want to get a look at the handout. It's a big day, kind of varied material. This is also brand new. All right. So this is what I'd like you to do. It looks like everybody's okay. Let's get back into Illustrator. And I'm going to need another copy of this. All right. So again, if you're tired of the head and you just want another simple shape, you could learn a lot of this, but like a circle is not going to really help you see the beauty of it, or a rectangle. So I'm sticking with the head plan. I'd like you to duplicate that head again, option drag it. And I'd like you to fill it with a flat color. All right. I want to talk about texture. So really today is sort of devoted to breaking out a flat. I want to be really clear if I had time, I want to show you all these amazing artists who always work with flat colors. You know, the equivalent of cutting out shapes of flat paper. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's amazing art made that way. But to break out of that limitation, well, there's patterns, there's blending modes, there's gradients, but what else? So I had to do something for a Mexican restaurant, and I got stuck on the taco. You know, the shape is just not that distinctive, but the texture is. And I could not make it feel like a taco until I explored textures. So I want to show you a couple ways to get around it. And sure enough, if you're doing sneakers or you're doing a tweed object, you're going to need this. So let's take a look. I want to talk to you about the effect menu. And I want to start by talking to you about the artistic section. So I want to show you what I mean by that. All right, do you have a new shape that's with a flat color in it? All right, so join me by going to make sure the fill box is in front. Very repetitive today. I'd like you to go to the effect menu. The effect menu is an interesting place. The top set are Illustrator effects, and a lot of them are not that exciting, to be honest with you. They're not the big players, right? These down here are stolen from Photoshop, and they do kind of wonders on our vector art. I want you to draw your attention in the Photoshop section to this area called Artistic, and I want you to go right to Film Grain. The Artistic section here looks like it's got maybe a dozen options, and Film Grain's one of my favorite. It opens up this huge window, right? And you can still use shortcuts like Command minus and Command plus, or Control minus and Control plus, to make sure you're seeing everything you need. And then if you look on the right, you'll notice that Artistic is treated like a folder. And there's a bunch of folders beneath it, right? You just chose one, Film Grain, that's in the Artistic section. You did Effect, Artistic, Film Grain. So on the right side is all kinds of stuff that you could do with Film Grain. This would actually leave and jump to one of the others. So I'm going to leave this drop-down menu alone. But I do want to play with these three. So I'm going to up my grain. And you can see he's got a very taco-like surface. I could play with highlight area and see if I get any results out of that. And I might not. It's really hard to say. It all has to do with what was the original object? Was it a gradient? Was it a flat color? Was it a pattern? So if you don't get much mileage out of one of them, move on. Now, I just got to say, though, it takes a lot of RAM. So your computer may need a little bit of time to adjust to your changes. I'm going to raise up intensity. And I got some results out of that. And I'm trying to find some kind of balance that gives me the surface that I want. Pretty cool. All right. If I liked it, I would click OK, right? I want you to, let's go ahead, click OK. There's my very stucco-like surface that I got from Film Grain. Now, I don't want to confuse anybody, but if you're liking this, yes, you can do this to something with a gradient. You could do it regardless of what the fill is. I'm starting with a flat color so we could focus on the texture without any distraction. All right, I'm going to ask you to get me another copy. So I'm going to make mine smaller, and I'm going to option drag a new copy. We'll compare them. I want to mention real quickly before we try out some others, how would I change it? How would I get rid of it? How do I change my mind, right? This is very techy, I'll admit it, but it's not too complicated. I'd like you to notice something. The properties palette is damn smart, right? It kind of knows what you're working on, right? So if you look down here, it currently says Film Grain, and there's a little trash can next to it. So that's one way to get rid of it. So you just made a copy, and I do want to get rid of the Film Grain. So make sure your copy's selected, look at your properties palette, and click this little trash can, right? And now you're back to not having any texture on it. Is that working for you? I can't tell. People look a little more uncertain, but everybody always looks that way in the last hour, last half hour. Let's try it again, all right? So this is what I'd like you to double check. You got your shape, you got a simple color in it, you got your fill box in front. I want you to look on the properties palette and see if it lists anything next to FX. If it doesn't, you're good. Let's try a different effect then. All right, again, make sure the fill box is in front. Let's go to the effect menu, back to artistic. We just tried film grain, and I think I want to try, let me just double check what I mapped out for you, because I want to stick with my own handout. I think I want to use sponge, but I just want to double check. Yeah, let's go with sponge. I'm choosing the ones that are particularly effective. So effect menu, artistic. In the same area as film grain, but further down you find sponge. So you can see that on the right are the controls for sponge. See what happens if you change the brush size. You may have to give it a minute or two. And if you're not getting enough results, you might want to try definition or smoothness. I have lower definition now, so it's subtle. Got a lot of definition now. It's kind of looking like a cork board, but it really depends what you're after. Combination. Last but not least is smoothness. So there's a very little bit of smoothness. It gets more grainy, a little bit more like film grain. And here it's just a little bit different. I do want to mention, though, that when you have the time, you could explore any of these, right? And I want to take a look at something back on my own handout. So I don't know. Sometimes I'll use these and blend them with something that's underneath. Sometimes I'll run it right on the object that needs the texture. There are others here that are worth checking out, like Rough Pastel and Smudge Stick. And frankly, you don't really have to leave. If you didn't click OK, you could just switch. So here's Rough Pastel. Gives you more options. Here's Smudge Stick. So I don't know. A lot of these are very similar. I pointed out the two that I've had the most success with. Film grain is one and sponge is another. But on your own, you might find that others are better for you. And again, it depends on what the original object is. So I'm gonna just go back to Smudge Stick and okay it. And this one's got some weird residue that I don't particularly like. So I might have to Command Z and try it again. So I do want to introduce you to one that I find particularly useful, which is the texture subset. They're all under the effect menu. We were just looking at a bunch under artistic. My other favorite section, though, is called texture. So I'd like you to take your object and have a look on the properties palette to see if you still have an effect on it. Right? So remember, select the object, make sure the fill box is in front. And if you look on the properties palette and it says Smudge Stick there, you could click the little trash can. All right. I want to go back to the effect menu. And this time, I don't want to go to artistic. I want to go down to texture. I just want to point out again, the handout will help guide you if you want to try this again later. We're going to try effect, texture, grain. So I'm doing effect, texture, very close to the bottom. This is a beauty. This is so useful to grain. Sometimes I think this is all you really need. I'm going to zoom in a bit. So there's the grain. And I could lower that intensity down to a finer kind of grain, or I could raise it up. And once you find the kind of texture you're after, you could play with contrast, which will give you a narrower range of colors to describe the texture. I'd like you to remember, you can zoom in or out, Command plus or Command minus. There's also a little plus and minus sign in the lower left corner, if you like it. But this part here is really worth exploring. You know, we're still in grain, but it has different grain types. And all of these are kind of interesting. Soft grain, sprinkles, clumped, contrasty. And really, like for this particular project, you know, again, a lot of cloth has textures. This one sacrifices color.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
So I'm doing leather sneakers, and so I was trying to figure out using the effects too to like see what would be best to make that leather effect. But I couldn't really figure it out. Like, what would be the best way?
You know, it's hard to say with leather. I'm almost tempted to try out plastic wrap. Let me just see. Let me show you what it looks like. It's a fair question. It's really hit and miss, to tell you the truth, because, you know, they're all going to behave so differently. I'm going to leave this for a minute here and go back up to artistic, where I think plastic wrap is. There it is. Right. This strikes me as kind of leathery. You know, the thing that I'm a little suspicious of is I don't really want it to place a highlight for me, you know. And I'm not sure that I get much control of it. I could reduce the highlight, though. It's a little less obtrusive. So that shiny leather quality. Here it is with more detail. I don't really see much of a difference myself on that. Maybe my computer's slowing down. Here it is with less detail. That's a small difference.
Yeah, it's more of like a crinkly kind of leather.
Is it? Again, I really can't really give you a recipe for that, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
I have the feeling the secret might be in one of these, you know. If you notice, everything I'm talking about today is either under artistic or texture, right? And if you're just shopping around for the right one, you could just stay here, try as many as you want. There are a lot that I don't use much, and some of them just throw out your color completely. But you know, you never know. Just because one says glass doesn't mean that glass is the effect you're going to get. You know, and again, I'm not sure how I feel about the stroke on that one. So each one's got, these are all black and white. This is just weird, you know. So I'm voting for the texture features, right? Or the artistic features. Now I'm going to actually stay right here because I do want to show you something else. And who knows, you know, Carly, maybe we'll find something here. That was texture grain. But effect texturizer is here. Oh, you know what? This might be the one, right? I'm always debating with myself, which one is best? Is there one that's best? This is definitely a candidate, right? Texturizer. And what I like is, look at all you get brick, burlap, canvas, and sandstone. Doesn't have leather, unfortunately. The brick I don't use much. Literally does look like bricks. Here's burlap. That is really useful. Here's canvas. That's incredibly believable, the canvas. And here's sandstone. Carly, not to cop out on you, but I myself have not needed to draw leather, right? I know the combinations of things I would try, but others have. So if you're not shy about it, you could always Google Adobe Illustrator in quotes to make sure it doesn't show you Photoshop. Adobe Illustrator followed with leather. Somebody wrote an article on how to imitate leather, you know, or did a short video. You know, it's you know, an advantage. So I don't know. You know, I do want to say about the textures, I'm a little shy about people piling textures on top of each other, which one can do. If you click OK, come back and add another texture, you're going to stack them up. I'm not recommending you do it, but I'm going to do it quickly just to make a point. So here I am in the texturizer, and I'm going to choose burlap because it's easy to see. And I'm going to OK this. So there it is. You can see I've got a profound texture. And by the way, everything you've learned so far this semester is still going to work. You know, I could still change the shape and all of that, right? But what I'm going to do, and this I really don't recommend, I just want to mention it in case you can't resist it. If I go ahead and I try a different effect on this one, I get a combination. So there's plastic wrap over the texturizer. And the only thing I want to say about that is to throw those out is harder because look over here, it's not listing them anymore. There's too many for them to list. It actually says, if I go over this, multiple effects, open the appearance panel for details. Well, I'm going to open the appearance panel. So that should be easy enough. Window menu, appearance. I love this, but it's too much for one day. I just want to point out, this one will list all your effects. So there's a lot of things you can do. You could hide one to see how it looks. You could hide them both. You could turn them back on. You could say, gee, I don't want the plastic wrap anymore. And you could highlight it. It gets its own trash can. So I do want to say just a quick plug for the appearance palette. Window menu, appearance. I don't expect you to absorb everything I'm teaching today at once. I do help you absorb the highlights, whatever they are for you, your highlights. But when push comes to shove, if you're going to go into a complex place of mixing everything I did today, you know, you're going to be using like effect textures with freeform gradients and some blending modes, right? Yeah, you're asking for a very complex recipe. And the only way for me to manage that stuff in the end is going to be the appearance palette because it knows all. So even if I started doing really weird stuff, like overlapping things and trying, you know, just wild decisions, you know, so I'm going to actually get my transparency palette out here to make things worse, right? You could see I'm getting some fascinating results out of this, right? But it's very layered and there's so much going on. The appearance palette becomes helpful. If I click this one, it's telling me everything I need to know. Stroke color, fill color, opacity, even telling me it's at multiply. Oh, I forgot that. Look at this. I could click this word and it lets me change it. The appearance palette is like one-stop shopping after you've tried lots of crazy things, right? But if you're piling up objects, it's going to take some thought. You hit return to accept it. What about this object? So now I chose the one on the bottom. It's got the texturizer on. It's got nothing else unusual. So the texturizer, I could click, boom, and choose a different texture. And okay that. So the appearance palette becomes kind of useful for remembering what you did to any selected object, and it has little shortcuts that let you change most features.
Hi, Professor.
Any questions right now? Yes, Levi.
Appearance again.
The appearance palette, so let me put it this way. So here I've got a page with numerous objects, and I might actually forget how they're set. So I would go to the window menu and open up this palette called Appearance. I love this. And I'll admit it's kind of advanced, and you don't need this if you choose simpler techniques. But if you're getting very complicated, you're going to need it. So you select an object to learn about it. This object's got a stroke, it's got a fill, it's at full opacity, otherwise it would show me the number, right? This object here, similar, showing me I've got this wild gradient. I could even change that color from here if I want. This object here is giving me more information because it's got a texture turned on. I'm sorry, I have to let somebody in. This is why I'm teaching in my living room. I'm finishing up class, so you're on your own for a bit. Okay. Thank you, Master.
Need some change. My card's not working.
What do you need? Yeah, I can't help you just now. I wish I could though. I got 25 people with me. Sorry about that, guys. So here you've got a trash can because let's say you don't like something, you could just drag it to the trash can, which is pretty cool, right? I'm going to Command Z that. Anything that's underlined lets you change it, and it kind of opens the palette it needs. This one opens up transparency. This one opens up the texturizer. So all I'm trying to say is the appearance palette is the best way to reorganize yourself. You know, click an object, learn about what you did, and you can make some changes from here. Did that help? Excellent. Does anybody have any questions? I think I would have about 1,000 if I was in this class today. Everyone's looking so stunned. That's all right. You know, like I said, I know so many artists that you could use half the features. These are today about choices, really. All right. I want to give you a peek at one more thing, and I know it's a lot for one day, right? Just a peek at something, right? And then I'm going to switch gears completely. I'd like you to select any object, and I want to show you guys something about changing its shape that I've been wanting to mention. There's a tool we've used a lot called the Transform tool. Free Transform tool. You could press the letter E to help you find it. Now, this tool here doesn't select. So I'm going to ask you to select an object first, then go to the Free Transform tool. Again, the letter E will help you find it. Now, some of the stuff it does is not interesting. It's like the black arrow, but it can't even select. It does let you scale, and it does let you rotate, but so does the black arrow. So what's the big deal? Here's the big deal. There's a little a little thing shows up whenever you choose this tool. And I got to be honest, I'm not going to use these. I want to point it out because you're welcome to explore them on your own. I want to show you a more professional way to achieve the goals of this particular tool. All right, guys, this is easy, but you have to follow with me exactly. We're going to need keys that only work if you click a handle first. So I'd like for you to choose a handle and press on it. Keep your finger down, keep it down, keep your mouse down, your stylus, whatever it is. And now hold down the Command key if you're on a Mac or Control if you're on Windows. And pull that corner wherever you want to see what you did. That's called distort. Now, if you don't do it in that order, so I'm going to Command Z. Hang on a second there. If you don't do it in that order, say you hold down Command first, it ignores you. So whatever reason, you have to press it, hold it down, keep Command down. At that point, you add Command and keep it down. You could distort it. Now, this is incredible because there's so many things I could do with that. So again, I'm running out of time, so I might have to come back to this, but I just want to show you something. Even with multiple objects, this becomes pretty useful. So what I've got here is, you know, I've got a better idea. So here I've got these objects, and I select them all and go to the Transform tool. Watch the way this behaves with the same technique. I'm in the Transform tool, I press any of the handles, and then I add Command or Control to achieve that. So it's okay to do it with the head. It's okay to do it with something else. That's amazing, right? Because very often I've drawn something that I quite like, but it's just not quite the right shape. I just wish the whole thing would be a little bit different. I want to show you something slightly more complex with the same tool. It's called perspective. I'm going to show you two different ways, but here's this shape. I just want you to see it because it's easy for me to make my point. I'm going to hold down this one, press it, and this time I'm going to add Command Option Shift on my Mac, all three. If I was on Windows, it would be Control Alt Shift. Perspective. How cool is that? So you grab a corner, keep it down, Command Option Shift or Control Alt Shift, and drag to see what it does. So whichever corner you choose is going to affect how the perspective is achieved. It's trying to find the exact opposite side and imitate it. So this time it's this one. And if I go out, I get that. Or if I go in, I get that. This is incredibly helpful. Now, my head here might not be too helpful for this demonstration, but let's find out. This guy wouldn't really be convincing in that kind of perspective. By the way, I have two heads stacked over there, kind of asking for trouble. Well, if it was just rotation or scaling, I'd use the black arrow. Here is some perspective. Like I said, head might not be the best. Some people are satisfied just with the command trick. You grab a corner, press it, just command alone, right? Or control on Windows. You could move one side and then go ahead and do the same trick on the other yourself. It's going to also have a very similar effect. Anybody have any questions about the transform tool with those keyboard shortcuts? It is called free transform, to be honest. These may help. And I was trying to move into this because they added this, not all that long ago, so people wouldn't have to know the keys. I find it less friendly, so I'm choosing to go with the keys. If you can only remember one, remember the command trick or the control click. Most people call it distort. So you're taking an object or a set of objects and distorting them with this box around it to imitate perspective or something else. It's a bounding box that you're altering. You guys must be tired. It was a lot of information today. I know some of you revisit the YouTube videos later. Again, you can look over the handout and see what you need. No, right now, your main focus is this particular project. So my prediction is there's going to be a lot of freeform gradient, and there's going to also be a bunch of texture stuff. I don't know how much patterns we're going to see, or even how much freeform, rather free transform like we were just doing. I think lots of gradients, lots of textures. I do want to show everybody something to kind of deal with the problem that we were having with some of your computers slowing down. I would field questions right now, but I want to take on this one issue. This is going to be a flat out demonstration, folks. So especially if your computer's been slow, I'd like you to watch this. Okay, so I've got a document and I want to place objects. Now, I had not planned to do this demonstration, right? So I'm going to wing it a little bit. Smart person would have all the photos in one folder, right? They're going to save the Illustrator file to the same folder and keep things together. But I didn't prepare and I don't want to make you wait. So I'm going to do it a little differently. I'm going to do File Menu Place. And I'm just going to go find some photos. Now, I want to mention something. In class, I've been saying uncheck link. So what I'm about to say is mostly for the people whose computers slowed down each time you added a photo. So if that starts happening, one would link instead. So I turn link on. Computer's taking its time. Oh, because that was in the iCloud drive. Oh, let me cancel out of here. Hang on a minute. I want a local photo. I don't know. Let's see. I'm taking 3 to make a point. I always say uncheck link. Oh, my computer doesn't like that. So this time I check link. 1/3. Here's 1. Here's 2. Here's 3. All right, ignore the mess. My point is, what now? You know, what's going on? You know, in fact, there's even a palette devoted to it called links, window menu links. And it's showing me that I've got 3 linked images. The big problem is, how do I get this to somebody? Right? How do I deliver it? So if you deliver someone the Illustrator file right now, those pictures are going to disappear, or they're going to have low-level previews that you're not going to be happy with. So that basically means I have to go an extra step to deliver it. Well, for next week, you could ignore it and just make me a JPEG or a PNG. You know, I would accept that because we're just going to be looking. Over the week, I'll decide how I want you to deliver it, right? But this should speed up your computer. For anyone who could stand it, right? If you did need to deliver this to somebody, this is the usual way. Save it. So I'm just going to call this demo, and I'm going to save it to my desktop. But then you package it. So I can see I'm going to have to make time for this subject, but here's a little preview in case you need this for another class soon. Your computer was too slow for all those photos, or your photos were just so big that it slowed everything down. I chose to turn on linking, which makes the Illustrator file faster, but to deliver it, I would go File Menu, Package. This is going to copy all the linked photos. And by the way, any fonts that you used. It's even going to make a report about it, which I don't care about. So I'm going to uncheck the report. It looks like it's going to make a folder name based on it called demo folder. And that's fine, or I could change it. And I could even choose where to put it. I'm going to leave it on the desktop. Essentially, File Menu, Package, and click Package. It gives me a warning that isn't important, and I okay it. I want to show you something before I wrap it up for today. I'm just going to okay this too. So on my desktop, here's the folder it said it would make. Let's get a look inside. There's the AI file, and here's the images. So that basically means if you deliver a package to me, I have to open the folder, right? Double click this, and it will give me all the photos I need for it to run. They'll automatically be attached, including fonts if I had used any, right? So if you're in a class and your computer's slowing down, you really have to deliver all the parts. They need to see the right photos at the right quality. They need the fonts, right? The secret is simply that, right? Again, and I'll do this when people are more awake. It's File Menu, Package. You could definitely just leave everything on if you want, but give it a name, give it a home. Desktop is good. And then click Package. It's going to produce a folder. I feel bad because I covered too much stuff today. You know, I would like to help those people whose computers were slow as well. And maybe I could stick around after class. I don't know if any of you can, just to chip in a little bit more on how to make these things behave on your own computer a little bit better. I want to get a look at the homework box, though. There's no surprises there, but I do want to look just to wrap it up neatly. I know a lot of you have to leave in 3 minutes. 1 second here. All right. Get out of here. This stuff is not urgent. I'm going to skip it today. Let's just look at the homework box. So next week, your second draft is due. And you know, what I saw when I just peeked in the breakout rooms today was good. And people handled it in smart ways. One person I saw, oh, actually, this was in Google Drive, had did all the lines. You know, hadn't dealt with the color of the blends, but they kind of drew out all the shapes they needed for all 4 shapes, all 4 views. That was one smart strategy. Patient person though, right? They saved the color for last. Other people just did 2, which is what was suggested on last week's handout. And they went far, you know, did a lot of rendering, had some beautiful stuff. Camera, guitar, you know, so some beautiful stuff. So if you went that second route, right, where you did 2 that are pretty rendered, do the other 2, you know, this week, right? If you did all line drawing, get busy with the color this week. The project's not due for 2 weeks, but next week, draft 2 is due, the second draft. If you're behind because you got sick or whatever happened to you, here's your chance to catch up, you know, do your best with the draft by next week. We'll do breakout rooms again so you can get some feedback from your peers. All right, so let's just take a quick look at any detail. This is all the same, right? So again, if you missed it, be sure you're working on the right width and height. Always look at these boxes. Make sure you've got a margin. Here's a little bit more about length. These are things we just discussed. So if you were following last week's handout exactly, you already did 2, but you might want to finish them. And then you want to begin the next 2. We're looking for as much detail as you can. Here's the name of the new file. This is the Illustrator file. If you wind up giving me a JPEG or a PNG, same name, .jpeg.png. Basically, continue it and call it draft 2. I know a lot of you have to run. Those people shouldn't be shy about sending me questions by email, right? I do my best to get to them quickly. Often I do, but not always. A bunch of you actually got emails from me this morning. Anybody have any questions while, just for now? You know, the questions? Folks, I am going to sign off of the recording. Let me stop my share for a minute. I'm going to stop recording. Bye, YouTube.